Emily sat at her desk staring at the computer screen, the cursor blinking against the unfinished email. The office was quiet except for the hum of fluorescent lights, but her mind wasn't on work. She was thinking about how different life felt now compared to when she and Daniel had first met. Back then, every glance carried excitement. Every evening was full of laughter, and every weekend felt like an adventure. 7 years of marriage later, they had settled into something stable. But it was a stability that sometimes felt more like silence. That Friday, Daniel sent her a message. "Claire and Ryan invited us over tonight. Games, wine, nothing serious. What do you think?" Emily read it twice. Claire and Ryan had been their friends for years, the couple they trusted most. They had shared countless dinners, holidays, and late-night conversations together. Something about the invitation felt comforting, like stepping into familiar warmth after a long day. She typed back quickly, "Yes, let's go." When evening came, Emily stood in front of the mirror, adjusting her sweater. She didn't want to overdress, was just a casual night, but she still wanted to look nice. Daniel walked in, keys in hand, and gave her a smile that was kind but distracted. They left the apartment and drove through the damp Seattle streets. The rain glistening under the streetlights. Claire opened the door the moment they knocked. Her energy was contagious. She hugged Emily tightly and pulled her inside, the smell of baked bread and wine filling the air. Ryan was in the living room setting up a board game, his easy grin making the space feel instantly lighter. Emily felt herself relax as laughter and chatter began to replace the heaviness of her day. The four of them sat around the coffee table, the board game pieces scattered, glasses filled. Conversation flowed naturally, work stories, travel dreams, small frustrations about daily life. Ryan teased Claire about how competitive she was, and Claire laughed so hard she nearly spilled her wine. Emily caught herself smiling more than she had in weeks. Hours passed quickly. The game became less important than the conversations weaving through the night. Emily leaned back against the couch, her head light from the wine, and realized how easy it felt being there. Daniel was beside her, relaxed in a way she hadn't seen in a while, his arm draped casually on the back of the couch. For the first time in months, she felt like they belonged somewhere beyond their routine. It was during one of those moments, when laughter quieted and the room softened, that Ryan leaned over to hug Emily. It wasn't unusual. They had always been affectionate as friends. But this hug felt different. It lingered just a little too long. His warmth pressing into her, his voice low when he said, "You're always such a good sport." Emily froze for a second, not because it was wrong, but because of how it made her feel. She pulled back quickly, smiling to cover her confusion, and told herself it was nothing more than friendship. But as the night continued, she found herself glancing at him when she thought no one was looking. She scolded herself silently. She was married. She loved Daniel, and Ryan was Claire's husband. Yet deep down, something inside her had shifted by midnight. The game pieces were forgotten, the glasses empty, and the four of them sat in the soft glow of the lamp, talking about how life seemed to change when you least expected it. Claire stretched out across the rug, laughing at something Daniel had said, while Ryan sat close enough to Emily that their shoulders brushed when he leaned forward. She told herself it was the wine, the late hour, the cozy room making her imagine things that weren't there. When Daniel finally said they should head home, Emily stood reluctantly. The warmth of the night clung to her like a blanket she didn't want to let go of. Claire hugged her goodbye, whispering about planning another night soon. And Ryan gave her a smile that seemed to hold an unspoken secret as Emily walked back to the car with Daniel. The cool air brushing her cheeks, she couldn't shake the strange feeling in her chest. It had just been a hug, she told herself firmly. Friends hugged all the time. But in the quiet of the drive home, with Daniel humming softly beside her, she realized the hug had awakened something she hadn't felt in a long time, a reminder that she still longed to be seen, noticed, and wanted. That night, lying in bed, Daniel drifted quickly into sleep. Emily stared at the ceiling, the sound of rain tapping against the window. She wanted to believe the evening was just what it looked like. Friends gathering, sharing laughter, nothing more. Yet, beneath it all, she sensed the beginning of something she couldn't name. something that might change everything if she let it. And deep down, she knew the hug wasn't something she could forget. It was the spark that had quietly lit a corner of her heart she thought had gone dark. What she didn't know yet was how that spark would grow, how it would pull them into choices that neither she nor Daniel could have predicted. The night had felt ordinary, but for Emily, it was the first step into something extraordinary and dangerous. What began as an invitation to a simple evening had opened the door to questions she wasn't ready to answer. 2 weeks after that night, Emily was still thinking about the hug. She told herself it didn't matter, that it was just in her head, but it returned in quiet moments and her walk to work. In the kitchen while she chopped vegetables, even while Daniel talked about his day. She loved her husband, but the memory of that hug carried a strange warmth. Like a spark she couldn't put out when Claire sent a text inviting them over again. Emily's heart raced in a way she couldn't explain. She didn't tell Daniel about her thoughts. She simply smiled and said, "Sure, let's go." That Saturday evening, they walked into Claire and Ryan's home once more, greeted by the smell of coffee and the sound of music playing softly in the background. The four of them settled into the living room, each with a drink in hand. At first, it felt the same easy laughter, playful teasing, and the comfortable rhythm of old friends. But as the night stretched on, the conversation took a turn. Claire leaned forward, her tone playful, yet serious. "You know," she said, her eyes moving between Daniel and Emily, "I've been reading about how couples sometimes do swaps. Not in a permanent way, just a way to see things differently." To bring excitement back, Emily blinked. She thought she had misheard. She looked at Daniel, expecting him to laugh, to brush it off as one of Claire's dramatic ideas. But he didn't. He sat still, his glass in his hand, its expression unreadable. Ryan leaned back in his chair, his gaze steady on Emily. "It's not as crazy as it sounds," he added. "Sometimes a new experience helps you appreciate what you already have." The room grew heavier. Emily's stomach tightened as she tried to process what she was hearing. Was this a joke? Claire was smiling, but her eyes held a seriousness that unsettled her. Daniel finally spoke, his voice calm but uncertain. "And what exactly are you suggesting?" Claire shrugged lightly. "Just a chance to switch things up. No pressure. But imagine the excitement, the honesty it could bring back. We're all adults here." Emily's heart pounded. She glanced at Daniel, hoping he would shut the idea down. Instead, he stayed quiet, his jaw tightening. That silence said more than words could. Emily realized with a sudden ache that Daniel was considering it. Her hands gripped the edge of the couch. She wanted to speak, to tell them all this was too much, but the words stuck in her throat. Instead, she caught Ryan's eyes again. His look wasn't playful, it was steady, deliberate, as if he had been waiting for this moment. And that scared her more than the suggestion itself. The rest of the night moved forward awkwardly. They played cards, tried to laugh, but the air was different now. Every glance carried weight. Every pause seemed loaded with questions no one wanted to ask out loud. When it was finally time to leave, Emily felt relief wash over her. As they stepped out into the cool night air, she turned to Daniel. "That was unexpected," she said softly. He nodded, his expression distant. "Yeah." Emily wanted him to tell her it was ridiculous, that they would never consider such a thing. But he didn't. Instead, he started the car. And they drove home in silence, the streetlights flashing across his face like shadows of unspoken thoughts. That night, Emily lay awake long after Daniel had fallen asleep. Her mind replayed Claire's words, Ryan's stare, and most of all, Daniel's silence. She thought about how tired their marriage had felt, how long it had been since Daniel looked at her the way he used to. She hated herself for even wondering, but part of her felt curious. What if this idea, as shocking as it was, really could change something? The next morning, Emily tried to act normal, cooking breakfast, asking Daniel about his plans for the day. But when their eyes met across the kitchen, she saw it again, that same hesitation, that same unspoken thought. Neither of them mentioned what Claire had said. But both of them knew it wasn't forgotten. The following week was filled with tension. Small things felt bigger than they were. When Daniel came home late from work, Emily wondered if he had talked to Claire. When her phone buzzed with a message from Ryan, just a casual, "How's your day?" her heart leaped in a way she wished it wouldn't. One evening, while folding laundry, Daniel finally broke the silence. About what Claire said. His voice trailed off. Uncertain. Emily froze. A shirt clutched in her hands. "What about it?" He sighed. "I don't know. Part of me thinks it's crazy, but another part wonders if maybe it could help us." Her chest tightened. She didn't know if she wanted to scream or cry. She placed the shirt down slowly, choosing her words carefully. "And if it breaks us instead?" Daniel looked at her for a long time. "Maybe we're already breaking," he whispered. The words cut deep, but she couldn't deny the truth in them. They had been drifting apart for months, maybe longer. The thought of doing something so bold terrified her, but so did the thought of losing him completely. That night, Emily lay awake again, staring at the ceiling. She remembered the way Ryan's hand had brushed hers the last time, the way it had felt both wrong and electrifying. She hated that her mind kept going back to it. She hated that a single hug, followed by Claire's wild suggestion, had cracked open the quiet shell of her marriage. By the end of the week, Claire sent another message. "Dinner at our place next Saturday. Just the four of us again." Emily stared at the words on her phone. She should have deleted the message. She should have said no. But her fingers hovered, and before she could stop herself, she typed, "Yes, we'll be there." She didn't know what would happen, but deep inside, she knew the ground beneath them was shifting. And once they stepped into that house again, there would be no going back. Saturday came faster than Emily expected. All week she told herself she might cancel, that she would think of an excuse. But when the day arrived, she found herself standing in front of the mirror again, smoothing down her dress. Daniel walked in, adjusting his shirt. Neither of them mentioned the tension hanging in the air. They just grabbed their coats and drove off. The drive to Claire and Ryan's house was quiet, except for the sound of rain hitting the windshield. Emily wanted to ask Daniel if he really wanted this, but the words stuck. She glanced at him, hoping for reassurance, but his eyes stayed on the road, his jaw tight. She turned back to the window, watching the blur of lights. Claire opened the door with her usual charm, pulling Emily into a hug as if nothing was unusual. Ryan greeted Daniel with a handshake, and soon they were gathered in the living room. Glasses filled, dinner already on the table. The food smelled wonderful, and for a while conversation felt normal again. They laughed about work stories, teased each other about old memories, and for a brief moment Emily almost believed the strange suggestion from last time had disappeared. But as the night wore on, things shifted. Claire leaned closer to Daniel, whispering something that made him laugh. Emily noticed the way he looked at her, not with desire exactly, but with attention, the kind he hadn't given Emily in a long time. Across the table, Ryan was watching Emily with quiet intensity. When their eyes met, he didn't look away. Her heart thudded, and she quickly lowered her gaze. Fiddling with her glass dot after dinner, they moved back to the living room. Music played softly in the background, and the four of them sat close together, the atmosphere charged with something unspoken. Claire suddenly said, "We don't have to pretend, you know. We're all thinking about it." Emily's breath caught. She wanted to protest, but Daniel didn't say a word. He shifted uncomfortably, then finally admitted, Maybe it wouldn't be so bad to try." The words hung in the air like thunder. Emily looked at him in shock. He hadn't talked to her about this, hadn't asked how she felt, and now he was saying it out loud. Claire's smile widened, and Ryan leaned closer, his shoulder brushing Emily's. She felt heat rush through her body, not just from him, but from the realization that Daniel was already halfway gone. Her mind screamed at her to stop this, to get up and leave. But when Ryan's hand brushed against hers, she didn't move. It was such a small touch, but it carried a weight she couldn't deny. She remembered the emptiness she had felt in her marriage, the way Daniel's eyes had dulled over the years, and in that moment, Ryan's attention felt like a lifeline. Daniel and Claire were talking quietly on the other side of the room, and Emily saw the way Claire leaned in, touching his arm laughing softly. The sight twisted something inside her: jealousy, fear, and strange relief all at once. For so long she had felt invisible, and now, watching Daniel respond to someone else, she realized he had been just as starved for attention as she was. Ryan leaned closer, his voice low. "You don't have to be afraid, Emily. You deserve to feel wanted." Her heart pounded in her chest. She wanted to tell him to stop, but the truth was, she didn't want him to. She was terrified of what that meant, terrified of what was happening, but she couldn't pull away. The rest of the evening blurred. Claire and Daniel grew closer with each laugh, each glance, while Ryan stayed near Emily, his presence constant, grounding and overwhelming at the same time. It wasn't about desire, it was about being noticed, about being reminded she was still alive. By the time they left that night, Emily felt like the world had tilted on its axis. She walked beside Daniel to the car, her mind spinning. She wanted to ask him what he felt, what he wanted. But the silence between them was heavy, filled with everything they couldn't admit back home. Emily sat on the edge of the bed while Daniel changed into his pajamas. He looked tired, almost guilty, but not regretful. She finally whispered, "Do you think this will save us or destroy us?" Daniel paused, then sat beside her. His voice was quiet. "I don't know, but I felt something tonight. Something I haven't felt in a long time." Her eyes stung with tears. "So did I," she admitted. They sat together in the dim light, not touching, not speaking, just breathing the same heavy air. Both of them knew the line had been crossed, even if nothing had gone too far yet. What began as friendship had shifted into dangerous territory, and neither of them could pretend otherwise. Emily lay awake long after Daniel fell asleep. Her mind replayed the brush of Ryan's hand against hers, the look in his eyes, the way Daniel had laughed with Claire. She thought about the years of routine, the quiet dinners, the unspoken distance between her and Daniel. For the first time, she wondered if this swap, this dangerous, unthinkable idea, wasn't just about excitement. Maybe it was about survival, but deep inside, she feared the truth. Once you crossed a line like this, there was no going back. And as she closed her eyes, her heart heavy with confusion, she realized the question wasn't if things would change, it was how far they would go before everything fell apart. The morning after that night at Claire and Ryan's, Emily woke early. Rain tapped against the bedroom window, soft and steady, but her chest felt anything but calm. She turned and looked at Daniel, still asleep beside her, his face relaxed in a way it hadn't been in weeks. For a moment, she wondered if he was dreaming of her or of Claire. She slipped quietly out of bed and went to the kitchen. The silence of their apartment pressed on her as she made coffee. Every sound, the clink of the spoon, the drip of the pot, seemed louder than usual. She tried to focus on something ordinary, but her thoughts kept circling back to last night. Ryan's hand brushing hers, Daniel's laughter with Claire. The way her heart had raced, torn between fear and longing. Daniel walked in, rubbing his eyes, hair messy. "Morning," he said, his voice rough with sleep. Emily handed him a mug. "Morning." They sat across from each other at the small kitchen table, steam curling up between them. Neither spoke for a long time. Finally, Emily broke the silence. "Was it a mistake?" Daniel looked down at his coffee, then back at her. His eyes were soft but clouded. "I don't know. Part of me feels guilty, but another part of me felt alive again. I can't remember the last time I laughed like that." Her chest tightened. She nodded slowly. "I felt it too, and that scares me." Daniel reached for her hand across the table, his touch gentle but unsure. "Maybe this is what we needed. Maybe we've been stuck so long we didn't even realize it." Emily wanted to believe him. She wanted to think last night had opened a door they could walk through together, but fear crept in. "And what if it destroys us?" she whispered. His grip tightened. "Then we decide now how far we'll let it go." The words lingered, heavy with unspoken choices. Over the next few days, everything felt different. At work, Emily found herself distracted, staring at her phone, half expecting a message from Ryan. When it came a simple, "Hope your day's going well," her stomach fluttered. She answered quickly, then stared at the screen. guilt twisting inside her dotted home. She and Daniel moved carefully around each other. There was no anger, no shouting, but an unspoken tension filled the space. They cooked dinner, washed dishes, sat on the couch watching TV, but every glance carried weight. Sometimes Daniel seemed closer, softer than before, as if the night had woken something in him. Other times he seemed far away, his thoughts elsewhere. One evening, Emily found him sitting on the balcony, staring out at the city lights. She joined him, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. He hesitated before answering. "Claire." His honesty hit her like a stone. He didn't apologize for saying it, and she didn't ask him to. Instead, she admitted quietly, "I've been thinking about Ryan." They both sat in silence, the truth hanging between them like fragile glass. It should have broken them apart, but strangely, it made them feel closer. For once, everything was on the surface instead of buried beneath years of silence. The following weekend, another invitation came from Claire. Dinner again, same time. Emily showed Daniel the message. He read it, his face unreadable, then said, "Do you want to go?" Her heart raced. "Do you?" "I'm not sure," he admitted. "But maybe we need to." When Saturday arrived, Emily felt a storm of emotions. Excitement, fear, guilt, curiosity. She dressed carefully, then stared at herself in the mirror. Was she still the same woman who once believed love was simple? Or had she already crossed into something she didn't recognize? At Claire and Ryan's, the mood was lighter than before, but beneath it ran an undercurrent they all felt. Conversation flowed, food was shared, but every laugh carried meaning. Every glance lingered too long. When Claire touched Daniel's arm, Emily noticed, but this time, instead of anger, she felt a strange relief. She wasn't the only one caught in this storm. Later, when Ryan leaned close to Emily and asked softly, "Are you okay?" she nodded, though her heart was pounding. His concern felt real, not playful. And for the first time, she wondered if this was less about excitement and more about filling holes they had all been ignoring. That night, back at home, Emily and Daniel didn't sleep right away. They lay side by side in the dark, listening to the rain. Finally, Daniel whispered, "Do you think this is helping us or hurting us?" Emily turned toward him, her voice breaking. "I don't know, but I feel like I'm waking up after years of being numb, and I don't want to go back." Daniel reached for her, pulling her close. For a moment, it felt like the old days, the closeness, the warmth, the sense of being partners instead of strangers. But beneath it all, the questions remained. Were they finding their way back to each other through this dangerous path? Or were they slowly drifting toward a place where their marriage would no longer survive? As the rain fell harder outside, Emily closed her eyes. She didn't know the answer. She only knew one thing with certainty. What had started as a simple hug had changed everything. And there was no returning to who they were before. Their future was no longer a straight line. It was a storm, and they were both standing in the middle of it, waiting to see where it would take them.